Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio.
Today's guest is Chandler Walker, a health and fitness coach and the founder and CEO of Stoneage Fuel. Stoneage Fuel is a brick-and-mortar fitness facility in Nevada running strength and conditioning and Olympic lifting fitness programming. Chandler himself specializes in Olympic weightlifting, gymnastics, and athletic performance for adults and youth. And he also specializes in making people feel good about themselves by instilling a newfound sense of confidence. Not your average personal trainer. I'm going to put this out there and not to play favorites, but this is a really awesome episode, and I suspect this intro won't do it justice. Just trust me on this. Chandler offers an incredible point of view on how to have compassionate conversations with your clients. I found myself wanting to learn more from him, and I hope you will too. Our show's sponsor is Primal Health Coach Institute, an NBHWC-approved health coaching school. This means that our graduates can qualify to sit for the national board exam to become a board-certified health coach. You can learn more about our Master Coach certification track at primalhealthcoach.com/mastercoach. And while you're on our website, navigate to primalhealthcoach.com/primalpro and learn all about the done-for-you 12-week app-based health coaching program we've put together so that certified health coaches can hit the ground running with an effective and transformational health coaching program right out of the gate. We know that developing program materials and sourcing a client management solution are two of the most show-stopping hurdles in new coaches getting started, and we made Primal Pro for you. Check it out at www.primalhealthcoach.com/primalpro. As you're listening to us, please make sure to screen grab your podcast player and tag us in your Instagram stories at Health Coach Radio. And as always, the show notes for this episode and all previous episodes can be found at primalhealthcoach.com/radio. It is time to get on with the show. Please do enjoy this thoughtful conversation with our guest, Chandler Walker.
Chandler Walker, how are you today?
Doing well. I am living the cold dream up here in the Reno Tahoe area. So there's ice everywhere. There's snow on the mountains. It looks cool, but I don't want to go outside.
Oh my gosh, Erin can relate, right, Erin?
I'm in Canada, so I have no sympathy for anybody.
Oh, yeah. Arctic
cold
tundra
everywhere. I mean, I'm in Florida and it's cold for Florida. We're in the 50s right now and we have frost for a couple of days. So
wow, I bet you all are locked up and not going outside, especially in Florida. That's ridiculous.
Ridiculous. I know. But the good news is in a couple of weeks, we'll be back in the 60s and 70s. But, look, we're excited to talk to you for a number of reasons. But before we jump in, I'd love for you to please just give our audience a little bit of a bio, a little bit of your backstory and kind of who you are, your history, and kind of what brought you to where you are and opening Stoneage Fuel. So give us the 911 or the 411 rather.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, here's the 911. This will be interesting. But so basically my story goes way back to when I was a kid. I grew up with a mother who suffered from bipolar disorder. And this was a long time ago. And back then it was, if you had any sort of mental health issues, people told you to put a smile on your face. There's nothing wrong with you. You're dumb and just move on. And that's what they told her. So she suffered until I was in my mid 20s, probably not recognizing there was a solution. And she found that solution through cognitive behavior therapy and stuff like that eventually. But growing up, I had to learn how to communicate with someone who was on both highs and lows and not move myself as a kid into hating that person. Because I think a lot of kids growing up hate their parents when they suffer from this kind of stuff. And so I really learned how to ask questions, how to understand intent, how to move into a neutral stance when communicating with a human being, and how to recognize that humans are emotional animals. And ultimately what this did was I felt like I really wanted to move on a path of creating change and help people because of what I went through as a kid. And so I went to school. I went to college for biochemistry. I became a master negotiator with all my advisors because I told them I don't want to study biology, but I like my immunology. I like microbiology. And so eventually we settled on biochemistry. And so then that took me to a med school route. And on that path, I got really disenfranchised because I felt like I was in this thing to help people. And I was stuck on this path to where all I was doing was providing medication.
Yeah.
And it's not a shot at doctors, because I think if a doctor could, they would prescribe an apple. But if you prescribe an apple, you're going to get sued, because that's not going to help people. And so what happens is you get stuck in this flux to where you can give medication because that's what people want. If you tell them to change their lifestyle, they won't do anything. And I pivot shifted. Growing up, my father he owned his own business, a siding and roofing business, and he would get me a donut and orange juice and take me to customers' houses. So I kind of got exposure to entrepreneurship young. And so I opened up our first business we call Stoneage Fuel. And it was centered around 6 areas of wellness, because I felt like I wanted to help people in a holistic fashion. So we worked on mental health, social health, nutrition, sleep, fitness, and habits. And during the course of that business, we did really well. I probably did 4,000 or 5,000 sales conversations. And then right before COVID hit, we pivot shifted and moved a lot of what we did online, which, looking back, I'm going to tell everybody that I predicted everything that was happening and I'm going to write a best-selling novel. But in reality, it was probably just dumb luck. But we were able to get our online business going, and we were able to grow somewhere around 1,800% over the course of the pandemic, because people really needed help and we were in the position to provide it.
Wow. Okay. You predicted it. Well, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. You're welcome, everybody.
Okay. So love this. Wow. That was great. That was very succinct, by the way. Good job. Okay. So there's a bunch of things we can talk about. So this idea that you sort of nurtured your inner negotiator when you were a kid, learning how to ride the emotions of kind of what your mom was putting forth. I think we'll talk about that. I just want to dive into Stoneage Fuel a little bit more, just so we can get a true sense of what this is. So what is it? Is like, what is Stoneage Fuel? Also, and remind me what the 6 components. I was jotting them down as you said: the mental health, social health, nutrition, sleep. One more thing in there, and plus habits. So what are those 6 components? And then what is it that you do at Stoneage Fuel? Sorry.
Yeah, so Stoneage Fuel was designed around taking back the sort of primal aspect of how we evolved from an evolutionary perspective. So how can we look at evolution in terms of where human beings were initially and where we are now, and what's changed and what's hasn't changed, and how we're fighting the wiring inside our own brain, bodies, and everything to create problems today. And so from what I saw during my experience at Stoneage Fuel and doing all these conversations with people, was we had to follow this sort of pattern to actually create change. And in that pattern, the first step was mental health, because if someone came in and they were mentally defeated, nutrition wasn't going to save them, fitness wasn't going to save them, nothing was going to save them. They were just going to fall off track and never actually achieve anything, which obviously wasn't my goal. And then the next thing I figured out was social health had to be in order, because if someone was on point mentally, but other people were telling them they were dumb, if they were afraid of social environments, if the interaction wasn't there, everything was going to be wrecked. And so then the third thing I kind of figured out was, all right, so if mental health and social health are on point, but sleep isn't, nothing's going to work. So their mental health is going to go down the wayside. Their nutrition's never going to work. And fitness is just going to release hormones and they're going to have issues. So sleep became the next component. Then the next component I looked at was, okay, now that all of that's in order, what comes next? Well, nutrition. So now we can start eating healthy. We can start focusing on the diet and ultimately helping people lose weight with a habits-based curriculum. And then the last piece we look at is fitness, because ultimately, I think for me, fitness is about longevity of life and bone density, not so much about, and obviously it taps into mental health and all that. And then at the end of the day, all of these 5 wrap into habits that allow this to happen long-term.
Cool. Okay. I was writing down some details as you said that, because that's really neat, because that's like an actual specific trajectory, like chronology, basically. And it's so cool, because it's just so cool to I don't know, having been in the industry for such a long time, how I love hearing that, okay, the first thing is mental health, then it's social health. Okay. Then it's sleep. Okay. And somewhere down the list is food. And then fitness is actually kind of at the bottom. Which is such an interesting paradigm shift from the olden days, where it was like diet and exercise, and that's all that we cared about. I even think I had a chronological list that I haven't really updated it in a long time, but it was like food is number 1, and then sleep is a close second. But maybe it's time to shift that a little bit, I think. But I also think that your emphasis on mental health and social health is really, unfortunately, novel, but also really cool. You put that top of the list.
Exactly.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
You have allies in us, because Laura and I both strenuously align with the sort of the ancestral evolutionary kind of how are humans wired to do life, and where's the disconnect? So we're really feeling that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we speak a lot to the fact that, hey, look, the human body, to your point, it hasn't really changed genetically in thousands of years, long time. And yet all of a sudden, in the last 50 years, we have this spike in chronic illness, and we keep treating the body like the body's broken, when in reality, the body's just telling us something. Because the environment has had such a massive change, we're just receiving this data in like what's happening around us, and our body's just responding accordingly. And so how can we shift the environment, right? So that the body expresses itself and the mind. They go hand in hand. And I love the fact that, I have this question for how you handle this from the standpoint of mental health being step one. We get questions a lot about scope of practice and where coaching fits in this space, both from physical health, nutrition, what have you, but also mental health. Now, I have to imagine your experience growing up as your kid with your mom puts you in a unique position to appreciate this, and you've got some skills that you've developed over time. So I guess my question for you is, first of all, in learning to communicate with your mom, did you seek help yourself and being able to learn how to understand her? And are you taking this into what you're doing today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so as a kid, I think maybe it was a defense mechanism, maybe it was a safety mechanism, but what I learned to do was ask questions. And I recognized, and in our sort of sales philosophy, we call this becoming a cognitive questioner or a cognitive listener. And so when she would speak, instead of saying things back to her, I would say, "Oh, well, that's interesting. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?" And I would ask her questions to sort of dive deeper into what she meant and where the core philosophy was. And turns out that's downward arrow technique from like cognitive behavior therapy. And so as I got older, I figured out that some of these things that I was doing were like psychotherapeutic modalities utilized in psychotherapy. And so as I got older and I figured out that I was doing some of this stuff, I got really deep into cognitive behavior therapy, motivational interviewing, acceptance commitment therapy, and a lot of these psychotherapeutic modalities of talk therapy, and recognizing the patterns that I was using maybe were a defense mechanism as a kid, but I was sort of mastering these inadvertently without even knowing it. And so that led me into working with a mentor who is a friend who is a doctor in clinical psychology. And she gave me books and ideas and strategies and really helped me understand and recognize what I was doing. And then I approached her with this curriculum I built. I said, "Hey, look, I've had this idea for a long time. I wanted to build this mental health program, and this is sort of what I built, and I'd really love to get your feedback." And so she looked at it and sent it back, and she said, "You've essentially built a model behind cognitive behavior therapy here." And so we started talking about it, and I told her, "So what's your opinion on like scope of practice? What can I do? What can I can't do? What's ethical? What's not?" And she said to me, she said, "Look, the industry is broken." She says, "In order for me to see a patient, sometimes it's an 8-week wait. When someone has a mental health issue," she told me, "they can't wait 8 weeks."
Yeah.
And she said, "So we're frustrated. The system's broken and we can't do anything about it." And so, and she told me, and in my opinion, the coaching environment is really where we can create a paradigm shift and help people. And so we started talking about it and talking through, well, we're not therapists, but we can learn to be empathetic communicators. We can learn to ask questions. We can learn to help people recognize and understand the values they're living in and the values that are important to them, and help them create the change they need inside their brain. Because more often than not, people are fighting the wiring inside their brain that says do this, but then they're doing the opposite. And like you were saying a minute ago, it's because of the way we've evolved as a society.
Yeah, great. So I love that you collaborated with a professional and seeked out that opinion. I think what I like hearing is that this idea that this empathetic communication is different from therapy. It's a tool that is not only available to coaches to use without feeling like they're out of scope of practice, but it's also really clutch tool to teach your clients to learn how to communicate in that way. I'm just thinking of an anecdote where we have some curriculum in our health coaching course that sometimes throws our students for a loop. So they'll see that it's a coaching demo where there's a coach and a client talking, and the coach is really walking through some of the CBT kind of motivational interviewing stuff. And a lot of our students say, man, that went pretty deep. That feels a little out of scope for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, the client presented with a ton of very in-depth insight because the coach was simply empathetically asking questions. Like,
Right.
we can ask the questions. What comes from it is what's going to come from it. But it is fully within scope of practice for us to be not only in scope of practice, it's a skill to master to be a good empathic question asker and listener.
Exactly. And my philosophy behind what you just said is, if I don't ask those questions and if I don't help that person recognize what's really happening, giving them a meal plan isn't going to help them. I'm just going to be another thing they do and another failure in their life. And to be honest, I'm not willing to settle for that. If I have to walk the line and be in this gray area, I'm willing to do it if I can have successful people. That's all that matters to me. And if these people, if I tell them something's wrong, they'll deny it. But if they tell themselves, that's when the powerful moment happens.
That's right. Yeah. Well, it's watching your language is that's such a weird way of saying it, but like we can control our language, and that's really what keeps us in scope of practice. But yeah, to your point, like it's time that coaches get comfortable having these kinds of conversations. Truly.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love to hear how you get started in that conversation with people around sort of mental health. So somebody comes to you to work with you, and you're saying the first pillar is mental health. Can you walk us through what that client experience is like?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing we do when someone walks in, because typically it's a weight loss environment where someone wants to lose weight and they come to us for help. And so the first thing I look at is values. We do a belief, values, and identity exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have them list 10 or so different things. So what values are important to you? And we have like work, spirituality, life, kids, all that stuff. And they have to rate 1 through 10 what's important to you. And then we have the same things next to it. And we have to put how closely are you living up to those values? And then below it, we have to put, why am I not living up to these values to where I would like to be or where I would want to be? They write it out, and then we have a conversation about it. And it starts just like, so I noticed that you put a 10 on family, but you put that you're living up to it about a 2. So what's going on there? Just walk me through where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And the key there is, I'm not aggressive. Like if you notice how I just did it, I dropped my tone. I'm not trying to be an alpha here. I'm trying to help them understand that I'm just going to ask questions and I'm going to help them work through what's happening in their head. And the interesting thing here is typically you're the first person who's ever asked them about it. So they have permission to open up. And when someone has permission to open up, they can give themselves permission to heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're working with people, and you kind of framed it as though you're working in this weight loss space predominantly, which is unfortunately the space I'm saying unfortunately because I'm having some bad feelings about it, but it's a space I also kind of play in. And I've tried doing values inventories and things like that with my clients previously and got a lot of pushback because they believe they just need to be told how to eat. Do you ever find that?
I do. And this is the concept I call becoming a challenging leader. And so I tell people when we're enrolling them, they have to do a phone call with us. If they give me pushback, I tell them, well, this might be a little concerning. And then I stop. I'm not going to, and they say, well, why are you concerned? Well, because I feel like there's a little bit of tension here and it's nothing against you and there's nothing wrong. I just feel like if we move into a coaching relationship, we're going to have some hard conversations. And if we can't have those, I'm not sure that I can help. Wow. So for me, before someone gets enrolled or is allowed into our program, they have to go through this process up front to where we not only work through what's going on, but we challenge issues and inhibitions along the way, affectionately and appropriately and empathetically, but to put them in the mindset to where I need to trust the process. And if this person and human being allows me to be part of their program, I can open up and I can recognize that there's a lot more going on than just the weight loss aspect.
Mm-hmm. Great.
You know, there's so much about weight loss, why people want to lose weight, but also why they are overweight to begin with. That's really rooted in a lot of psychology, right? A lot of just sort of mental unwellness where people seek out, not that they seek out behaviors, but they fall into behaviors as a result of trying to cope with stress, trying to cope with some sort of trauma, using it as a sense of reward. when I think back to like my grandma, I love her. The woman was a phenomenal cook, but she was always feeding me. And her answer to everything was always food, literally always. And I think this is a generational thing from her generation.
Yeah, mine always tells me I'm too skinny and just keep shoving food in your mouth.
Yeah, my grandma was Italian, mangia, and if I cleared my plate and went for seconds, I ate good.
You're a winner that day. Yeah. It's the family lifestyle.
Wow. I look back at it now and I'm, these are these things that have been culturally and socially, to use your second step, ingrained in us, and some of the things we've talked about both on our podcast and within our group is, and I heard you use this term, anytime, look, I eat differently than 95% of the people that I know. And when I first started to make a shift, I was almost shamed for it, that, that somehow the fact that I opted for a salad instead of pizza was somehow a bad thing, and so from a social perspective, this comes up with a lot of people when they quote unquote start a program or start a diet or try to make a change. The social connections that they once had feel fragile, right? That somehow this change has to change their social framework. And look, for some people, that might not be a bad thing, right? If the sum total of the people that you spend time with are for the, knocking on the door of alcoholics, basically, that the only reason they get together is to drink, maybe making a change in your social connections is not necessarily a bad thing. But boy, is that a huge hump for people to overcome. So I can certainly see why focusing on kind of the mental well-being and mindset first has got to be super important in order for them to feel brave enough to sort of venture into something new socially. How does that tend to flow for you? And where do you, in that realm, kind of find the most pushback, or how do you help folks over that hump?
Yeah, that's a good question, because often people will be like, well, I don't want to go to the barbecue and wear a dunce hat and eat boiled chicken and rice in the corner. And so you kind of have to prep people for that. And in the beginning, when we're focusing on the mental health side and we're starting to get things on track, I'll tell them, like, look, just eat the pizza with your friends. Sometimes it's okay to just do the thing and not feel weird in the environment. And then you're done afterward. It's not going to kill you. And you're probably going to be better off at the end because you're going to feel better. And then ultimately what we do, though, eventually, is we take an inventory, a social inventory, and we write down who are the destructive relationships in your life, what are the neutral and what are the positive. And then we work toward, okay, how do we make a plan to remove the destructive relationships? And sometimes with the clients we get really deep and powerful relationships that have harmed them for a long period of time. Yeah. So we work through removing that from our lives. We work through giving them permission to accept that person won't be in their life and removing their attachment. And then we talk about, okay, where can the neutral people, are they destructive? Do they have the potential to be destructive, or do we want them to make a more positive influence in our life? Do we want them to move to the inventory to where you have people who you can depend on and who end up being the people you can stand on? And so then once we take that inventory, we create a plan, and we create that plan surrounding removing destructive, moving neutral, and making positive, making more time for the positive people in your life. It's as simple as, like, you have this person who you said is one of the most impactful people in your life, but you haven't talked to him in 2 years. Yeah. Well, what's going on? Oh, just busy and I'm disconnected in work. All right, well, your homework this week is just give them a call, have a 15-minute chat. And they do it. And they're like, that was the coolest thing I've ever done. I guess I never even thought about it. And so it's these little things that bring this back into their life that allow them to feel good about who they're becoming.
Very interesting.
Yeah, community, gosh, is just so important. And I think, to your point, like, the pandemic has, boy, has that brought that to the forefront. The number of people that have realized how much their mental health suffers when they're isolated from those that they've really found joy in being around, that they just can't, so it doesn't surprise me that your business skyrocketed during the pandemic at all, particularly with the sort of leading focus that you begin with here with your program.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, we were probably the only ones prepared to do it. Everyone else was like a pop-up program that kind of tried to make it happen. We were already organized. We already had a system. We already had a structured curriculum. And we were the only ones talking about, we call it the brain code rewiring your brain to stop fighting cravings and finally lose weight through the neuronutrition method. So I think the fact that we were prepared gave us that leg up. And the fact that we were focused on something different was huge. Like our biggest point of the thing that people like the most from us is the fact that we talk about the mental health side of things. We talk about the stuff that other people won't talk about.
Right. You described, this predicting the pandemic, just tongue in cheek. So I'm just trying to understand. So did you originally plan this to be like an in-person type of curriculum, or had you planned it to be fully virtual and autonomous from out the gates?
Yeah. So in the beginning, what I wanted to do was create, and so rewinding a little bit, before we opened the brick and mortar, I had a blog that we called stoneagefuel.blogspot.com. And we were invited to do seminars. We did seminars all over the US. And then eventually I was like, all right, maybe I don't want to travel anymore. So we opened the brick and mortar. We went through the brick and mortar for several years. And then at some point I recognized and realized that I was limited. I wasn't able to help people globally. And I was starting to get questions. People were asking me in the US, Canada, Australia, the Netherlands about what we could do and if we could help them. So it encouraged me to create something that allowed me to branch out and build what we were doing into a global movement. And ultimately, that's what happened. It went from this, and I recognized there was opportunity, and then pivot shifted to essentially capture that opportunity worldwide.
Great. Okay, cool. I honestly I love hearing that. And I'm a staunch advocate for coaches who are listening, who are maybe kind of newer in their practice, like starting with that model. Just start with it. Start with the belief that the audience is fully global, because at this point it truly is.
It's a small world now. It's one Facebook ad and we're connected to 18 different places. So
yeah, awesome. Cool. So I guess you can speak to a little bit. I mean, you just dropped Facebook ads. So I mean, from a business development perspective, do you have expertise in that you can share, or do you farm this kind of stuff out to pros, or how do you manage the actual logistics of growing your business?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so in my experience, I've been through the ringer. I've probably spent 50 or 60K in coaches and coaching programs. And what it taught me was I need to know what I'm doing, why it works, the KPIs associated with it, and how before I hire someone. Because if I don't, I'm going to get wrecked. I'm going to get wrecked with Facebook ads managers. I'm going to get wrecked with coaches, and it's not going to be a good experience. So what I've learned is if I don't know how to do it, I need to learn how to do it. And then once I understand it, then I can farm it out, because I can recognize and spot who's good and who's not. And so at this point, I know how to run our Facebook ads. I know what the KPIs are. I know how to adjust them. I've created SOPs surrounding that stuff. And I know how to make a VSL. I'm fairly good at copy and sales at this point. And now I can farm them out. I can hire them out because I can mentor and I can recognize and spot what works and what doesn't.
Can you share? I know there's people listening that are like, I don't know what KPI means.
Oh, key performance indicator. Right. So
some of these other sort of acronyms, a lot of people listening are gonna be like, I don't even know what that is. So
which makes sense.
Like a moron. Yeah. Yeah. So KPI, you also used a few terms in there. VSL.
A VSL, video sales letter. So think about it this way. A VSL is like you opt in on a page and you watch a 15-minute video. That's essentially a VSL. It's a sales letter selling you something via video. Even if it doesn't feel like sales, that's what that format is. And then a KPI, a good example is like, say you want your close rate in sales. So people want, like in the high ticket world, 20% is like a standard KPI, which is the key performance indicator to close 20% of clients who come in.
Yeah. Interesting.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Would you say you're a person who inherently has a business mind, or is this a learned skill for you?
I think it's a learned skill. When I look at myself, the fact that I went to school for biochem really helped me a lot. And the fact that I had a father who was an entrepreneur allowed me to make quick decisions. And my mother, even though she struggled, instilled a lot of confidence in me to be able to make decisions and not worry about being wrong, which I think is where most people really fail and falter in business. And so for me, I will dive into something. I'll become obsessed with it. I'll get good at it. I'll move forward without all the info. I'll screw it up. I'll fix it. I'll do it again. I'll screw it up again. And then I'll finally have it down. And so that's sort of my process. I will never have all the information at hand, but I will figure out how to make it work. And I will adjust and modify based on the scientific method until I find a hypothesis that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, dude, this is the way humans learn, is by getting stuff wrong the first time. And you know why it went wrong with any luck. If you don't, time to reflect, right? And then take what you learned rather than being afraid of making a mistake, using it as an opportunity to grow and know what not to do next time, I guess, or to then further inform a hypothesis of what might actually work next time and give that a try. I mean, I know, so, I don't know if you know Mark Sisson or who he is, but he's kind of the main co-founder figurehead of our school. And he has told us many times that he started multiple businesses and they didn't all work. And he's lost money on certain businesses, but the ones that were successful were really successful. But he learned a lot from every venture that he'd ever been a part of, for sure. So you have your Stoneage Fuel where you're helping end clients. But before we clicked record, you were also talking about how you help other entrepreneurs like this learn how to sell from a place that doesn't feel salesy or sleazy. And trying to think of the term you used. How you describe that sort of sales process. Would you share that with us a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. And so this is another example of my own madness and using that scientific method to create what I wanted to do. And so going through this process when I was at Stoneage Fuel in the gym and our online program, I think I did 3,000 or 4,000 sales calls, probably more. It's just too big of a number to really pay attention to at this point. But what I did was along the way was I hired sales coaches. I thought, well, I have to hire a coach to be good at sales. But then most of the time they would tell me the call doesn't start till objections. You have to assume the close. You have to force them to make a decision. And every time I heard that, I thought to myself, what am I even doing?
Yeah.
Like, I got in this industry to help people because I didn't like giving pills in the medical world. And look at me now. I'm forcing people to make a decision to be healthy. It's like, why would I manipulate when the whole intent is to heal? And so I started looking at our program and I started looking at what I was doing inherently with my own communication and what I learned from the CBT stuff and the doctor and clinical psychology I was working with. And I recognized that I had a system of language patterns that I could use and that I was using and that worked fairly well when I wasn't trying to do what the sales trainers were teaching me. And so then I created this system we call compassion conversations, how to have a therapeutic conversation with another human being and enroll them in your programs at a high ticket price without manipulation, aggressive tactics, or being salesy. And it came down to 3 components. And I've talked to them about them a little bit already. Becoming a cognitive listener or a cognitive questioner, designing the model of the challenging leader, and ultimately detaching from the need to sell.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Awesome.
Good.
Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So the cognitive listener model is the idea behind when someone comes in and asks questions. It's a lot of sales trainers will tell you, well, just find the pain, stick them with the knife and twist the knife. And if they cry, they buy. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like if someone cries on a sales call, they're going to be either, and I want to think about it, or they're going to ask for a refund because I got them in too much of an emotional position. So I was like, all right, this is stupid. I'm not going to do the cry they buy stuff. And so becoming a cognitive questioner is asking them questions to understand what's going on. We have 2 phases. We have the external statement. So what brought you on the call today? Oh, well, I want to lose weight. External statement. My goal is to find the internal belief pattern associated with what's really happening, connect the dots to the past, and then help them understand and redefine what's really going on. And that's ultimately how we create the cognitive questioner model. And so, for example, someone comes in and says, I want to lose weight. We tell them, okay, great, cool. A lot of people want to lose weight. It's a big part of what we do, but tell me a little bit about why. What's going on? Well, I want to wear a bikini at the beach. All right. Yeah, that's a great idea. I want to look good in a bikini at the beach, but tell me a little bit, why is that important to you? And so then because I want to shed this weight so I look good out there. Well, okay, well, what's important about looking good? Well, I want to feel confident out there. Okay, I totally get it. What makes confidence important to you? I just don't want people to look at me and feel disgusted. That's what I want. Because now, okay, well, what's going on? Talk to me about this. Has this been going on for a while? Is in your past, has this been a problem? Well, yeah, growing up, I had this my parents were super critical, and they always told me I wasn't good enough. I never felt good enough. And I was a little bit overweight. And so all of a sudden now I understand the history. And if I can understand the history, I can say, okay, well, I think I can tell you that diets might not even be the answer to you being successful, because what I've noticed here is this pattern is you fighting the wiring inside your brain that says you might never be good enough. And so now they recognize there's a much bigger problem at hand, and there's a much bigger issue going on. And then it moves them to a moment of, I've never thought about it this way. Nobody's ever told me this. What do I do now? Can you help me? And my response is, maybe, if you're open to answering a few more questions and we can really work through what's happening, I could possibly help you. Are you open to that? And you moved into this environment to now, I'm not just a guy on the phone. I'm someone they can confide in. I'm a leader they can follow. And I'm someone they can believe in, because I'm telling them something that they've ultimately never heard before.
That's great. So I love that approach to going from the extrinsic to the intrinsic. And then that extra little ingredient, which is connecting to the history or the origin of that ultimate why. On a discovery call, that feels like bam, right? Like right out the gate. So when this person who, when they uncover their, maybe the root of this internal factor, and now you're a leader they can follow and somebody they can confide in and trust. Do you think, in your opinion, that this connection to like an emotional moment is this what is encouraging the client to move forward with you? Like somebody's actually made an emotional connection to me that doesn't feel manipulative. Are we still not using, but factoring emotion into the situation here, but just like in a less kind of slimy way?
Yeah, and what we're doing is I want to get them in that state ultimately so they trust me. And then I'm going to move into the challenging leader concept. So when they say, can you help me? Well, maybe. I don't know. And then what I'll do is I'll move into, okay, so based on what I'm hearing, here's where you're at. I give them a summary. Does that make sense? Oh yeah, that's pretty, you said it better than I could. All right, well, like on a scale of 1 to 10 though, do you feel like you really need help right now? Oh yeah, I'm a 9. Gotcha. Well, why not like a 3? Why so high? I continuously want to challenge them. I tell everybody, I'm going to fight you not to buy this thing as hard as I can. So when you do it, it's a good decision for you. And so then as we move to the pitch, it's like, okay, because you said this, we're going to do that. Because you said that, what we'll do is this. And because you said this over here, this will make sense. Does that make sense? Yeah, that makes sense. Well, why does that make sense though? Like, tell me why this would even be important to you. Why would you even want to do this? And then at the end, that's pretty much all I have today. What do you want to do from here? Can I join? I don't know, probably. Is that what you want to do? And they're like, well, this idiot, just take my money. And so the idea behind it though, is they have to say yes a million times. And it's not to get them to repeatedly say yes, which is a sales tactic. It's to get them to essentially challenge their own internal beliefs and challenge not just their emotion, but step into the logical at the same time. So they have to make a decision on 2 fronts, emotion, logic. And I can challenge them to continuously force them to make that decision. So the emotional decision isn't the only one that's made, because if they only make the emotional decision, they're going to have buyer's remorse. And that's where refund requests come in. And that's where most sales goes wrong. So I need to challenge them and step out of that and say, are you sure you want this thing? Are you sure this makes sense to you? Why though? Well, hold on. Explain to me why you should enroll in this thing, because now it's emotion and logic, forcing them to make an intelligent decision.
Well, so there's a couple things in there. I've spent probably close to 30 years in sales now, and I've taken a million different sales training programs. And eventually you kind of get out of the always be closing mindset. I think that's sort of out of fashion these days, but
Glengarry Ross.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then we've moved into more of like this needs-based selling kind of a concept, but like you, so more and more people in the sales realm are learning how important it is to ask questions. But to your point, there's still a fair amount of manipulation built in there. And so what you just described, I noticed a few things. First and foremost, it helps the client like almost pre-experience what it's going to be like to work with you, right? You're sort of coaching them into helping them make a decision, which you're going to do throughout the course of your coaching relationship. This is just the onboarding portion of that relationship. So it helps them pre-experience who you are and what coaching is going to feel like. And it also draws a distinct contrast between coaching and what you're doing and like a dietitian or a personal trainer or some of these other things that they might have formulated in their mind or had past experience with, like, whoa, this is going to be really different. And it allows you to tap into the emotion in a way that's not frantic. It's really more the recognition of what's there and why they need something different. Why just going into another diet or a new fitness program over the long term is likely not going to serve them, because once again, I will always feel inadequate because that's what's going on inside my brain or what have you. Right. And then this is a concept that has come up in a lot of the later sales training too, the idea of letting them sell themselves. That kind of sounds manipulative, but it's not really. It's about building confidence and making a choice that they want to make, but because they are unsure of what lies on the other side of that, which you've already addressed in the beginning. Now I kind of know what this is going to be like. And so they've sort of pre-sold themselves. So I have a question here that comes up quite a bit in our community, Erin. When you're having these conversations, do these people know what the price tag is before going into your conversation? Or is that not discussed until after they've already had this conversation with you? Because we've heard arguments kind of on both sides as to the role of getting the pricing out there upfront or saving that until we know if it's really the right fit. Do you have an opinion there?
I do. And I've tested this on two fronts, and I have a sort of, I guess, not even a middle of the ground, but I've noticed the more prolific you are, the more likely it is you can drop the price up front and they'll still move forward. Like I had a person message me asking questions about mentorship and what we do the other day. And I just told them the price in Messenger, and they got on the call and bought. And so, but it's because they've been watching my content. They've been nurtured. They've been in my Facebook group. They've been around for like, I think it was 6 or 7 months. And so they didn't care. They trusted and believed in what we do because they'd consumed enough. But if someone's brand new and say you're running a Facebook ad and you drop the price on a video sales letter that they're just watching for the first time and they don't know you, they're just going to click off and go away because they don't recognize the magnitude of what you do yet. And so I think you have to see, do I have like 100,000 followers on Instagram, and do they know me and do they trust me and believe me? If that's the case, you can probably drop the price and it's going to be fine. But if you're running cold ads to cold people and they don't know you yet and you drop the price, they're never going to talk to you again because they don't know who you are. They don't recognize the value you bring, and they don't trust you, and they shouldn't trust you because they don't know who you are yet. And so I think it really depends on those two fronts.
Okay. Yeah. I like talking about logistics like this. So you have a sense when you get on these discovery calls of how much this person already knows you, which you can kind of get away with.
Yeah. And I'll have them fill out like a little application. So what's your name? How long have you known me? How are you in my Facebook group? And stuff like that. So that way I kind of start to recognize, okay, they know me. They've been in my Facebook group for 7 months. And so then I can tailor what I'm going to talk about and how I'm going to approach this person based on that. Because if someone's been in my Facebook group for 7 months, they get on and they're like, oh, I watched the training on this and that and thought this was really cool. And I really need to work with you. But then me, I'm going to tell them, yeah, that's great. And I appreciate it. But this isn't really about me. And I want to make sure that what you're doing today is good for you. I don't want you jumping in my program because you've watched my Facebook videos. I want you doing this because it's for you.
Yeah. A lot of what you said when you're describing your compassionate conversation and especially getting into the challenging leader sort of phase of it, I thought was really, really crucial. And what I really liked what you said was this idea of like, we need to bring emotion and logic in at the get-go, both, because a lot of people will click the buy now button based on emotion. And then their logical little angel on their shoulder will talk them out of it later. And But do you still find, even when you get these very strong hell yeses, because like I think that's what you're ultimately getting is, you know, you, in your own words, you're fighting to try to get this person to not buy it, like you're almost trying to talk them out of it, and until they're like, yes, yes, please, yes, I need this. But do you still find that they sometimes forget what that felt like on that initial call? And do you have a way of calling back up what was shared when they said yes? And or do you find there's value in that? Or what if anything do you do when you come when folks maybe weeks down the line start to kind of forget why they said hell yes?
Yeah. So what we figured out is it's continuously indoctrinating them into your culture and the reason behind what they're doing. So one of the first things that we'll have them do as soon as they pay and they're on the sales conversation, we'll tell them, okay, what I want you to do is just open your calendar and circle today's date. And in that date, I want you to write down today's the day I changed the rest of my life. And I'm going to call you a year from now and we're going to look at that date and cry together. It's going to be awesome. And then I tell them, okay, now what I want you to do is I want you to write a letter to yourself. So we do an exercise where I want you to write a letter to where you're giving your future self is giving you a pep talk today of how awesome it is to be successful, how awesome it is to whatever they said is going on and to have it solved. And every day for the rest of your life or however long we need to do this, I want you to wake up and read that letter. And so what they do is they write this letter. We have a video that guides them through how to do it now. So, and they go through it, they send it to you, you read it. And then every day they wake up with this motivational thing of who they're going to become. And so what they're doing is they're already tapping into the identity that they want to be.
Yeah.
And it's creating the culture that they need to continuously feel bought into what they're doing now.
Nice.
Yeah, I love that. We've had who was it, Erin? Someone else we spoke to.
That was years ago.
Yeah, and she was. It wasn't a letter. I think it was like a journal entry. Like you're journaling what your life is like today. Very present tense. This is what I'm doing. This is what my day is like. This is what's around me. This is what it feels like. And I absolutely, and I've taken that approach a couple times with people who just keep like, I'm never going to get there. This all seems like too much, you know, that I just think it's such an invaluable exercise. And to your point, it's probably something, not probably, it is something that I'm going to be doing with every single client moving forward, because it couldn't possibly do anything but help.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's incredible. And when they write who their future self is and they start working back, they give themselves that pep talk, that alone creates a huge healing aspect for them. And it gives them the permission to keep moving forward. And when it gets hard, they go back and they say, hey, look, I was doubting myself, but then I read my letter and I recognize where I'm going and why I'm getting there. And I mean, for me still, when I read those letters, I get goosebumps because of the raw emotion behind it. It's incredible what people write and really what they open up with.
Yeah. I love that you have a video that delivers instructions. That's a really great idea. I have this field on my discovery form or my intake form, sorry, when clients sign up with me, and it's like, describe to me your life in 10 years when all of these things are better for you, and write it in the first person, but folks just can't.
Yeah.
They struggle with the of that video. What I think this exercise really does is two really crucial things. First of all, it speaks to, you use the word identity. So how our clients self-identify is one of the biggest barriers we'll always be up against, in my opinion. I'm the kind of person who always screws up after 2 weeks. I'm the kind of person who can't trust myself. I self-sabotage, or I'm the kind of person who. And so getting them to connect to this new identity, not a new identity, but it's them, but just like a more positive expression of their identity regularly, can maybe start, training that identity muscle. And then, but also the imagination muscle. Like if you can't imagine in a writing exercise like this, what life will be like when you're better or different or whatever it is, I feel like it's just almost impossible to achieve it.
Exactly. And I think that's such a good point. It's if they can't recognize who they could be, there's a much bigger problem at hand. And we have this negative reversal mindset, for lack of a better term, that says, I'll never get there. I'm not good enough. And I just suck. Every time I do something, I screw it up. And so then we have to help them reorganize their thoughts and reanalyze from this emotional fear-based mindset into, well, let's explore the scenarios. Yeah, you might be a terrible person, but I don't think that's the truth. Talk to me about like who you really are. And so it kind of shifts them into what you're saying, into the ability to finally think clearly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm curious how many people you work with that really struggle with that. I mean, I would imagine the fact that someone's even looking to hire you means they envision something, but what percentage of the people that you work with really kind of push back on that and have a hard time being able to even express it?
Yeah, I'd probably say about 20% of the people who come in are
Mhm.
just so down that they don't
Yeah.
know how to get there. And so we have a process. Our coaches will get on and do it with them, and they'll
Okay.
ask them questions, and they'll work through. They'll do the empathetic questionnaire, cognitive questionnaire concept, and they'll ask them questions about, okay, well, talk to me about your happiest moment. What made that a happy moment? Why were you happy there? What makes you happy right now? And then we'll help them write it. And then, okay, well, let's write this together. So your future self is that happy moment, and let's talk about that in the future, and then we'll work back with them, and so then we can get past that. So about 20% of our people do go through that, like, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
And that's why we made the video too, because now if they watch that step-by-step instruction, it makes it a lot easier for more people to be able to actually discover what's going on and work through it. But then if they still can't, then we have that process where we do it with them.
That's lovely. I like that idea.
Mhm.
Just sort of asking them questions and sort of helping them craft the story or co-crafting it with them it's a really nice approach. Time consuming, I would imagine, but worth it. I mean, obviously.
Exactly. And this is, I tell people, like, our programs are $3,200 for 12 weeks for our health coaching program. And the reason it's expensive is so we can do those things. Like, I don't need to work with 200 people. I can work with however many I need to, and we can create change and work with them very closely to make sure they're successful.
Yeah. Well, I love that you told us the price, because like this is the thing, is when we're dealing in transformation, this is just my opinion again, but I do struggle with some of the concepts around scale your business, scale to group coaching, which just feels out of integrity for me. I want to be with the people that I'm with in a really meaningful way. So therefore I'm going to charge a lot more. Sure, I could, I guess I could scale my business and quit trading time for money if I went to group coaching, but I just don't want to. So I love that you shared that.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. I have a video I talked about where I said why the group coaching model sucks, and I don't think it's ideal. And so the big thing behind me is, like, people tell you, oh, scale your business, you need to do group coaching. That's the only way you make money. And I'm like, well, those are also the people with a 60% client success rate or a 30% client success rate. And then when those clients aren't successful, they blame their mindset. And honestly, I'm not willing to settle for that. And we've been able to create a business that has high margins, where we work one-on-one with people. They have access to us, and our success rate is 97%. And for me, like we talked about before, I'm about science. And if I can't get that client success rate to be as high as humanly possible, I'm not willing to even structure the business and keep it running, because you can make money and you can help a majority of your clients.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that. I love that. Gosh, yes. Finally somebody who agrees with me. Okay, let's kind of backtrack a little bit. So you mentioned a couple of things that when you're talking about this, your compassionate conversation, your sales call sort of technique. One of them was sort of detaching from the outcome of the sale altogether, which I thought was great. But one thing that you talked about, you kind of dropped it in kind of like a cringy way, this idea of overcoming objection. So let's imagine somebody has gone through this sales, and I'd be curious to know your close rate if you're open to sharing it, but like this person is like, no. What do you do with a no?
Yeah, if someone's like a no, I say, hey, that's all right. I'm totally okay with your decision. So tell me a little bit about that. What's going on? And they'll explain it to you. And typically what I find is, if I get an objection that's like, I'm not interested, then that's okay. We'll ask questions and work through it. If I get a spouse objection or a financial objection, my opinion on that and what we do is we handle that in discovery. So if someone has a spouse, we talk about alignment with spouse and a partner. So in discovery, we it's not like, hey, I need your spouse on the phone call to make a decision together. I cringe when I hear people say that, like, another person today wasn't able to make a decision because of an unsupportive spouse. I'm like, no, it's just stupid. It doesn't make, maybe not stupid, but it doesn't make sense. I guess it is stupid, because you need the support of your spouse if you're going to make a purchasing decision. And so we talk about alignment. Like, okay, well, let's talk about the people that are important in your life. You said you have a spouse. How many times have you done a diet and they've done it with you? Well, they haven't. Okay, well, what happens? Oh, they bring home Taco Bell and I have to eat my food.
Yeah.
Well, do you think you're in alignment there? For someone to be really successful in our programs, what we find is alignment is important, and alignment between you and your spouse and us. Because if your spouse is bringing home Taco Bell or pizza and you're trying to do your thing, well, emotionally, you're going to give in and you're going to eat that pizza. So without that alignment, it doesn't really make sense for you to do another thing. So I challenge them on that alignment to make sure that's together, which prevents spouse objections down the line and ultimately gets them to a place to where they agree and they accept, and we can move into whatever we need to do after that. And same thing with finances. A lot of people they're afraid to talk about money, and they don't like talking about money. And for me, I tell them, we're going to detach from the sale so we can talk about money and not worry about closing people, not worry about selling people. And so when we get to the money phase, we do this all in discovery. We tell them, so tell me a little bit about, in order for me to create the thing that's going to make the most sense for you, understanding one of the biggest stressors in life, aka your budget, will be really important. So are you open to that? Most people say yes. If they don't, we challenge it. Well, that's just a little bit of a concern. Well, why? Well, because if we were to get into a coaching relationship and we can't talk about these hard things, it's going to be really hard to make change. And so then we go through full finances. I know what they make at the end of the month. I know what they bring home. I know if they're like drowning in debt. And so then when we go to the price, we can have a custom price that makes sense for their budget too, or we already kind of know where they're at. So we can say, okay, the program is $3,200, but because you said that you have about $700 left over at the end of the month, what we can do is set you up on a payment plan that's 3 months. And so they're already set and finances are kind of taken care of, and you didn't drop a bomb on them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, look, talking about money for a lot of people is just super uncomfortable for so many reasons, but you've got to be willing to kind of get that out of the way. I worked in finance for 20 some years. And to a certain degree, there's an aspect of, well, that's none of your business, right? However, a lot of times when, from a coaching perspective, in that you had referenced kind of how people rate their satisfaction or their values around various things. And like financially is one of the pieces of the puzzle for me too. We're trying to identify sources of stress. If what they really value, and I've seen this with people, is around money. And these are typically people that grew up very financially insecure. So it's a really, and really important part of their like wheel. And, I don't use the term value. I use kind of their satisfaction. How do they feel about these things? But, just trying to identify. But I think being able to remove some of the emotion behind money can serve both the coach, right, as far as their own view on what they should be charging people and how much money they think they need to make, but also it helps sort of serve the client, understand the role that plays, and is that also something that's contributing to whatever it is that's getting in the way for them sort of achieving their health goals. So I mean, so when you're working with coaches, let's say, I mean, I know you kind of coach coaches through having these conversations. Does that come up? And is that part of what you help people with?
Yeah. So when we're coaching coaches, them having problems with talking about money and working through it, we work through it with them. So well, tell me a little bit about where you're feeling a disconnect with money. And you do the same thing as the cognitive question or philosophy. You work with them to understand where it stems from, where it is, and what's ultimately happening, and then set them up with a plan to detach from the idea that they're going to look slimy, detach from the idea that they're only there asking for money, detach from the idea that it's uncomfortable asking for money, and attach to the idea that if you don't ask for it, you're not prepared. And if you're not prepared, you're going to get a lot of no's. And if you get a lot of no's, you can't really help people. And so we sometimes have to work with them too to uncover these deep-rooted beliefs that money's evil, that you don't talk about money, that you don't talk about people's salaries, and move into, well, 67% of the people you're going to want to work with are going to have money issues.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to be able to work through that with them to help them. And so if you really want to help people, have to learn to talk about money.
Nice. The money thing is I hate talking about money, so I'm just going to quickly change the subject. No, I'm not.
Move on.
I'm not. But I was really drawn to the sort of spousal misalignment objection. I really love how you sort of your ask back, as like when you've done a program like this before, a diet before, an eating plan before, has your spouse done it with you? And if it's like, nope, no, we don't, he brings home the Taco Bell. I love how you frame that. So without that alignment, there's really no point in doing another thing. It's just a really very clear, just sort of illumination of that fact. But then is there like, what happens after that? So if you say to your, like, I'm just really curious, like if you say to your prospective client, if you're not aligned with your spouse, then there's no point in jumping into this relationship because this is just another thing that's going to be out of alignment for the two of you. Or can you start to troubleshoot how to bring the spouse into alignment, or is that not even worth a conversation worth having?
Yeah, I've tested it a bunch of different ways. And what I figured out that works the best is at that point, what I'll say is, what I think would make the most sense here is let's get your spouse and do this thing together. Because here's what's going to happen. We're going to talk about this thing, and then your spouse, who you haven't really had this work together with, isn't going to understand it. Not because they don't love you, not because they don't believe in you, but because if someone doesn't hear it, they don't recognize and understand what's happening. And so would you be open to chatting together about ultimately how we create this alignment? Not how we create a program for you, but how we create alignment together, because that's what we need for success. And to be honest, I'm just not willing to bet on your failure. And so we move into the spouse coming on and chatting with it. And then it's a process of, it's almost like marriage counseling sometimes when you have people together, because it's like, hey, and you get permission before the spouse comes on to tell the spouse what's happening, because sometimes they haven't talked about it. So you ask the person, like, is it okay if I bring up some of the things we've chatted about? Have you talked about this? And they'll either say yes or no. Then you work through based on that together. Then when you get on the call, it's, I want you to know I really appreciate you coming on here. And I want you to know this is about alignment. And this is about making sure that what's happening is a good decision for all parties. And so I don't know if you're aware, but this is happening and this is happening and this is going on. And I just kind of want to make sure you know where we're at and want to know how you feel about that. And so now you're bringing the spouse into what's going on. And in my experience, they usually have no idea. They don't know the amount of pain the other person's in. They don't know the amount of struggle. They don't know the internal thoughts that are happening. And it's a really big gut check for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. That's cool. So you're not bringing the spouse on to say, I'm putting you on the diet too, my friend. It's like, let's just talk about alignment here. Kind of. So that's a nice way of like really getting to the root problem, which isn't, I feel like I've heard this from my clients so many times, like my husband is sabotaging me because he's bringing home the chips. And it's like, I don't think he's sabotaging you. I don't know the guy though. Right. So getting to know the guy and having that conversation about alignment, it seems very valuable. That's a very interesting approach.
Yeah. And then the spouse, in my experience, they become part of the process and they feel good about it. And they want to help now. They recognize there's a problem. They feel horrible because they didn't know, because we don't talk about this stuff often. You bring home Taco Bell because that's what you wanted to eat, not because you wanted to wreck your significant other's like health. And so then they're like, okay, well, like we'll go shopping together. I'll help you. And all of a sudden the spouse is committed to this thing. And for me, that's what you need to create success. You need all parties committed and ready to go. And then I have couples come back and they're like, you know what? We figured out it's not that our kids wouldn't eat stuff. It's that we were using them as a scapegoat. So we didn't have to. And I'm like, no, we got the whole family on board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I work with a lot of women who, gosh, boy, I mean, that comes up occasionally. Hey, I feel like I'm being sabotaged, or that my spouse is afraid for me to change. That comes up, but most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, he's just clueless. And in the mind of the spouse, it's a lot of times it's, well, if she really wants to lose weight, if I bring home chips, she's just not going to eat the chips. So if she chooses to eat the chips, it's because this really isn't all that important. Like, they don't get it. It's not that they are trying to be an obstacle in any way. They just don't get it. And sometimes I think inviting them on so that you can sort of be this neutral party that kind of, with any luck, can kind of help diffuse tension a little bit if you can get good at this. But boy, sometimes if you're not adept at that, that can cause some angst, I guess. I mean, do you have some recommendations on how to approach a conversation with the spouse?
Yeah, and that's a good thought. And this is the first thing that we do is we ask for permission to share, and we ask them if they've shared this with their spouse before. And typically the answer is no. So then we have to help formulate a game plan. And then when we do get on with the spouse, we do sort of a feedback loop to them. So, hey, just first you validate the fact that they're there. You tell them you appreciate the fact that they actually took the time to get on the call. And then you work through. So are you open to kind of talking about where so-and-so is at and what they're feeling? Yeah, of course. Okay, so so-and-so is basically, she's been struggling with this for like 15 years. She said, we figured out that it's beyond weight loss. She was forced to eat her whole plate as a kid, and that's turned into a snowball problem to where now she overeats and she's fighting the wiring in her brain. And ultimately, when Taco Bell and stuff like that is brought into the house, she can't say no to it because of how she grew up. And so she's in this perpetual cycle of failure, and she feels, her words, disgusting. She doesn't want to be naked in front of you. And ultimately it's really bringing her a lot of pain. And I want to make sure you're aware. And I want to ask you how that makes you feel. And so it's
heavy.
It's
a moment to where as soon as I ask them how it makes them feel, I don't talk again.
Right.
Because that needs to simmer. And it's honestly a really big self-realization moment for the spouse, because like we were saying a minute ago, it's not that they don't love this person. It's not that they intentionally force them to sabotage. They just don't know, because we don't talk about that stuff. And often we don't know how to talk about that stuff.
I really want to thank you for just some of the communication tactics and examples that you shared here. I think that giving us these example conversations can really help folks to intellectualize what a compassionate conversation sounds like. And I've never done sales. I've literally never done sales a day in my life until I went to practice as a health coach. And I went into every sales conversation not really caring if I sold or not, only wanting to help people. So by all accounts, I was doing it wrong because I wasn't asking to see people's credit card statements and try to, shame them out of drinking their Starbucks lattes. If you didn't drink a Starbucks latte every day, you could afford, I just never was going to do that. And I've often felt that if we just are absolutely real and compassionate and step into these relationships with these beautiful people on the phone with us, it will become clear almost immediately that we either are or are not going to proceed together in a relationship. So I'm appreciative of specifically the examples you've given us today. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do it. I think that's important. I think a lot of people think they need to like hide what they do because it's a secret. But in reality, I tell people I'll give you everything that I have, and probably still need coaching, because communication is a complex process, and learning to communicate and really create this environment is ultimately a challenging part that we need coaching on it. And so being able to provide feedback and examples helps people recognize and internalize and sort of process how they would approach this and how it would look, and then really say, okay, I can see myself doing this, and this seems aligned with me.
Or I'm wondering if folks are listening and saying, wow, I like that. I just really don't even know how to do it, or it doesn't feel, I don't know how to get this kind of compassion out from within me. So when you work with coaches, do you mentor them through role plays and things to really get them practicing this stuff, get the muscle memory?
Yeah. So they basically, when they come in, they have unlimited access to us in our messenger. So they can ask any questions they want. We send voice memos back, and it's not like a group with 700 people. It's just you and the coach. And then we also have unlimited phone calls so they can book whenever they want. But every time they go through a module, they'll go through the first piece and then they have to make a video of themselves going through it. They submit it to us, we review it, and then we get on a call and we role play it to give them the green light to move forward. So for me, the idea is I don't want someone just watching videos and pretending like they know what's going on.
Right.
I want them doing, and then I want them showing via making a video for me. And then I want them actually being tested on it to make sure that they have it down. And it's not testing like, oh, you're right or you're wrong. It's okay, cool. Well, what happened was here's your feedback sheet. You did 1, 2, 3 really, really well. And I'm super pumped that we have that down. But let's work on 4 and 5, because I think we can really facilitate this to have a much better and impactful conversation. So why don't you go back and let's work on just 4 and 5 and make sure we get that, and then we'll move forward.
Yeah, nice. Because it's a practice that needs to be embodied. It truly, I can't be learned in a book or on an online course.
Exactly. And that's my philosophy. It's human language and connection are a really complex topic. And like you're saying, reading a book, it's not going to get you there. Watching videos, it's not going to get you there. And it's ultimately why we don't do any like low ticket stuff. Like you're not going to find a $39 course from us. I think I have one thing that's $49, and it's how to get through the spouse objection. Like we just talked about that process, but that's it. Otherwise you're either going to be coached or not, because I don't think there's any in between for success.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think, look, coaches listening, if sales scares the shit out of you, excuse my language, then learn to use the coaching skills that you bring to the table to onboard people. Call it something else if it makes you feel more comfortable. But an approach like this allows you to uncover emotion, not use it against people, right? But uncover the real emotion that's behind what's motivating someone to seek you out in the first place. That allows the client to recognize the emotion that's there, that it's not just weight loss, because clearly I've done 10 other diets in the past that didn't really work. It worked until it didn't work, and being able to create a space that allows that client to make a decision that they have confidence in is a gift. And it sounds to me like that's what this process is all about. So if you don't mind, so share with our listeners where they can kind of follow you and just learn more about what you're doing, both on the client side, but then also with other coaches. Like how can they start following you, I guess stalking you a little bit, or if they want to reach out and have a conversation?
Yeah. So if you want the entire framework, I call it the 9-step framework to compassion conversations. I just give that away. You can go to 9step.cultureofcare.life. And what that'll do is you'll download it and it'll send it via email. And then you'll go right into our Facebook group where I do a free live training once a week. People get on there and they ask questions. So I try to facilitate a lot of education and just build a culture in there. If you want to follow me personally, you can go to my instagram.com/Chandler_SAF. You'll see me. It's a picture of me and my daughter. I have a man bun in the picture. You can't miss me. And if you think you did miss me, just DM me and I'll respond and talk to you. You can follow me on Facebook, which is Chandler, facebook.com/ChandlerSAF. Same picture. I'm like sideways with the man bun and my daughter's on my back. So you'll know it's me because I post like 98% of things with me and my daughter, because she's the most important thing to me. And then a little bit of business stuff where you can get nuggets of gold. But if you download the 9-step framework, that puts you into my Facebook group to where you'll get all the business information. There's probably, I think there's like 120 videos in there. You could get lost. It's like a free course all in and of itself. And I like to tell people what I create in there is better than most people's paid programs, because that's the experience I want to facilitate when someone comes into our culture. Like what we do is next level.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah, this has been a next level conversation. I really appreciate it, Chandler.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to share, happy to share, and ultimately give people some value and make them recognize that you can build a culture of care in your business. It doesn't have to be icky. It doesn't have to be gross, and you can be in alignment with it. And I'm the perfect example. I'm just an obsessive compulsive biochemist who won't settle for anything and ultimately created these things.
I love it. Awesome. We learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to do it.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.